All right, welcome everyone to our webinar this evening on autism. My name is Emily Lebu. I am a family and community engagement liaison for Special School District. I appreciate everyone being here tonight. We are part of the Family and Community Engagement Department, and our mission there is to partner with students, families, and staff to support students' specialized academic, social, and emotional needs to promote authentic inclusion, self-determination, and equitable opportunities. So if you have any questions, you can visit us at ssdmo.org/face. So this is a webinar and it will be recorded. Your camera and microphone have been disabled, so you don't see each other, but you can see the hosts. You can ask questions using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. But chat has been limited to contact between the panelists, so you won't be able to use the chat feature. We do these things because we cannot guarantee a confidential environment, so please do not share any kind of identifiable information that is specific to your family and or your student. And if you do have questions or need additional assistance, please ask the host. Closed captioning has been activated, and a recording of this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube site within 1 week.
Okay.
So without much further ado, I would love for our hosts to be able to introduce themselves.
All right. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Jennifer Davis, and I am from the SSD Autism Effective Practice Specialist team at Special School District. And with me is
Tina Rogers. I'm on the same team with Miss Jen, and I am an Autism Effective Practice Specialist, and I serve Hazelwood and Ferg Floor school districts. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So our agenda tonight is a little bit of introductions. We'll talk about outcomes. We'll give you a historical perspective of autism, some possible causes, and overview of the medical versus educational diagnosis, some common characteristics. We'll have some strategies to increase success at home, and then we'll have a little bit of time for some question and answers. All right, so our outcomes today, my goal and Ms. Tina's goal is that participants will be able to identify characteristics of people with autism, and that you'll have some tools to increase your child's success at home and in the community. All right, so autism. What is autism? Well, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It was first described by Leo Kanner in 1943. It is a spectrum disorder, meaning that it is a communication disorder and not a behavior disorder. It's usually diagnosed by age 3. Although we are finding that post-pandemic, some of our diagnosis is a little bit later, just more recently. It's also 4 times more common in males than in females. And again, that number is very current, that it's more common in males than females, but we're also learning that females are most often diagnosed a little bit later because of the tools we have. And autism as a diagnosis, it knows no racial, ethnic, or socioeconomic boundaries. So autism is not a mental or emotional illness. It's not a conduct disorder. It's also not curable. It's not diagnosed by any type of medical procedure at this time. It is a behavior disorder, but it's not the same set of behaviors in all individuals. So if we look at the autism prevalence, and this number is constantly improving and changing, but the prevalence has increased 241% since 2000. That's about the time I started my career, and it's just overwhelming at how much the diagnosis has changed, the increase in the prevalence. So currently it's 1 in 44, although I will tell you that last week, some new statistics have come out from a couple of different sources. We initially took this information from the Centers of Disease Control, but we have 3 new resources that have statistics looking at, they looked at 8 different communities, and we're finding it's in 8-year-olds, it's currently 1 in 36 instead of 1 in 44 births. So, like I said, that number is often changing as we learn more. So for every 1 girl, I said there's 4.1 boys identified. We know that there are some genetics involved, and we also know that it is more, we have better awareness and better testing, but that really only explains some of the increase. And so when we think about it, why is the increase? Well, the definition of autism has broadened. We do have better awareness. We have more acceptability. There's less of a stigma with it, but that really only explains some of the growth. It doesn't explain it all. And as it becomes more clear, as we understand this disability more, we know that there's multiple causes that come into play. So one, it is based on chromosomal research, and that individuals are predisposed, you might say, to be affected. But there's also an environmental trigger, either in the womb or around the time of birth, that there are many studies currently in the works to help us determine a little bit deeper dive into why such an increase and so fast. So clearly, he eliminates like some fears about vaccinations. That's been eliminated years ago. However, even though it's been disproven over and over, it continues to come up. So whenever I have a forum like this, I like to reiterate again, there's nothing proven about that. It's been disproven multiple times. But we are looking at the role of viruses, of bacteria, of different chemicals, drugs that we're exposed through in our environment, and that those may be some possible causes. So Tina and I spend a lot of time trying to do our best to keep up on best practices. We also work hard to keep up on the newest research. And we really, it is constantly growing and changing. I would bet multiple times a month, someone on our team's bringing a new article with new information. So keep in mind that there's no single cause for all of the increase. And when it's multiple causes, it means that it's going to take us longer to really figure out more what the cause is. And although it's leaning towards that predisposition, those environmental triggers while in the womb, that's something that, again, is going to take some time for the medical field to come up with more answers for us. Right now, I would say we have more questions than answers. So when we think about neurotypical people, I identify as a neurotypical person. I look at people's faces, I look at region, I look at their eyes, I look at their facial expressions. Regions of my limbic system light up that reward me. And so when we look at differences that may affect development, if we look at a typical baby looks at the mother's face from birth. Each time the baby does that, they get a small amount of dopamine, and that rewards them. So the child's going to look at the mother's face even more. When doing that, babies learn to pay attention to voice, to intonation, to eye gaze, even to eyebrow position and facial changes. And that immediate feedback is very rewarding. For individuals on the spectrum, they often pay attention to faces very little. And in doing that, they start to miss different parts in their environment. So they not only did not develop the skill to read that nonverbal communication that we receive from eyebrows and facial turn up, when your lips turn up because you're smiling. Our students individuals who are on the spectrum, as they're missing that, it means that as they struggle with that nonverbal communication, they also struggle with remembering faces. They might miss out on those conventions of the conversation, that reciprocity, that back and forth that we do as we're communicating. So all of those skills, that foundational skills to being strong communicators, develops early on. And by not catching on to the eye gaze, students are beginning to struggle with what we call joint attention. If you think about our students in school, when they are working with a teacher and a teacher might be pointing to something on a board or pointing to something on their paper, a student who has a weakness with joint attention, they're going to have a weakness with referencing it. So they might be missing out on some of the learning. You'll also notice that when we're not able to read other people's faces or their body language, we miss intentions. We might read emotions differently. And all of this leads to one of the core deficits we see in students with autism. So what I'm talking about here is that idea of shared gaze or joint attention. And remember, I initially said this sets the foundation. What foundation is that? Well, that's social skills, communication skills. It's the beginning of literacy, writing. So many of our academic skills start with this foundation. All right, so I talked a little bit about I had a neurotypical brain and that kids on the spectrum have a neurodiverse brain. And so what are those unique neurological differences? Well, we actually can go back pretty far, and we have a lot of different research studies that looked at brain scans. And if you look at this overview here, it shows a neurotypical brain scan. The green is showing how we are processing objects when we're looking at faces. And if you notice, individuals with autism, faces, sounds, different parts of the brain reserved to process the images and sounds are more of the non-social parts of the brain versus the more social parts of the brain. We don't use brain scans for diagnosis, and I don't see us doing that in the future. I think it's too intrusive, but we do have some research that does show some brain differences. So this kind of naturally leads me into discussing the roads to diagnosis. There's two different diagnoses, one being medical and one being educational. You would think that they line up perfectly, but I'm here to tell you they do not. It'd make life a lot easier if they did, being in the field, but that's just not the case. We use different tools, and we have slightly differing criteria. So if we think about all the roads lead to many different paths. When we think about medical diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, we use the DSM-5. And there are different severity levels. Severity levels, from my understanding, from multiple medical professionals discussing, are there, many believe are there for the interest of insurance companies. Different levels of severity leads to different allowable services, you might say. But when we think about the two routes being education or medical, I think the takeaway is that the medical diagnosis comes from the DSM. Currently, it's the 5th version. It really looks at two main areas, that social communication or social interactives and restrictive or repetitive patterns of behavior. And if you notice on my slide, they overlap. If you think about that as how it's interacting with each other. So you might think that that you have a medical diagnosis, it automatically leads to an educational diagnosis, but the educational criteria is slightly different. So when we think about the educational diagnosis, the educational definition is that it's a lifelong developmental disability, and it significantly affects verbal communication as well as nonverbal communication, social interaction, and it must adversely affect a person's educational performance. So what does that look like? Well, we talk a lot about 4 quadrants. And in the 4 quadrants, the first quadrant would be communication and language, disturbances in speech, language and cognition, and nonverbal communication, and social skills. So disturbances in that ability to relate to people, objects, and events. So what we're really looking at in layman's terms are things like perspective taking, turn taking, maintaining a conversation, having that reciprocity, being able to read someone's nonverbal communication, like a facial expression or proximity. A person might stand next to you to kind of redirect. That motherly look my mom would give me when I was saying something she didn't want me to say or do. She would kind of give me a look, and I knew that meant I needed to sit a certain way or do something differently. That is that nonverbal communication. And the social skills is how we relate. So that might be things like waiting. It might be something like participating in a game, following the rules. The other two areas that we often see and that we are encouraged to describe within the evaluation are disturbances in rate and sequences. These might be looked at as like a scattered skill development. So they have some strengths in running, in managing the playground, climbing, jumping, but then may struggle with a fine motor component. Maybe you can do very fine motor, might be I can find the tiniest little piece of something and use an exceptional pincher grasp, but I have trouble holding a pencil, or I'm not as strong to push something into a button, into a buttonhole. Maybe a student in one way can read very well, but struggles with comprehension, and may be able to read and follow along quite a lengthy recipe, but won't maintain a conversation. And then the fourth quadrant is on sensory processing. And this is just how students relate to sensory stimulation. Now, it may be a hyper, being overly aware, or it could be a hypo of being underly aware. So the student might be overly aware to sounds in the environment, but might be under aware of someone sitting on the carpet next to them and they get into their space or sit on top of them. And the most important piece too, when we look at educational criteria for autism, is looking at the adverse effects on educational performance. So we must link it to how is it impacting the student in the school setting, in the academic performance, in literacy, and math, and writing, to indicate that a person meets the criteria as being educationally disabled. So if we think and we dive a little deeper into that differences or disturbance in the ability to relate appropriately to people, events, and objects, I want to take a minute to dive deeper and think about how a student who meets this would lack perspective. They would prefer maybe to be around adults. Maybe they struggle with peer relationships. And we often start seeing that even more in middle and high school. They might have difficulty understanding shades of emotion. It is you are very mad or you are happy. There's not an in between. Well, I'm frustrated. I'm sad. It's nope, I'm devastated or I'm great. So those shades, those in between levels of emotion, most of the time it's both extremes. Difficulty using objects in an appropriate functional manner. So a lot of times when I'm working with younger students, I'll notice that they will perhaps struggle with using a spoon to stir. You might use a spoon to tap, or instead of putting the ring on a ring stacker or a sorting, wants to spin the ring or set the ring, on their fingers. So not using it with the functional or intended manner. Difficulty understanding or following the social rules and expectations. This comes into play when you think about, when we're at school and we go to an assembly, it's important that we follow the other rules. And one of the rules of that type of activity is that you're going to sit and you're going to listen. Maybe you get to participate in different fun activities, but it's often shorter. So those social rules and expectations of different environments are areas of struggle. That insistence on sameness, it can look like obsessive compulsive. But it's more likely rigid, perfectionist, and that sameness is safe. And one of the things we talk a lot about when we're working with teachers is that emotional regulation. So when we think about how we regulate, and we do a lot of hard things, but when we regulate, we have mutual regulation where someone's helping us regulate, and we have self-regulation where we have strategies on our own that we're able to help relax us, get us calm, put us in a energy state that's ready to do school activities, social activities. That's all emotional regulation. If we dove a little deeper into that other quadrant of disturbances in speech, language, cognition, and nonverbal communication, you might think about some students might be non-speaking. They're little or less verbal communication. Maybe you've heard the term echolalia. And echolalia, it kind of comes in and out of the research and how often it's used, but it's that repeating. So when a student might repeat something from a movie or repeat something they just heard, maybe they used a script. So you've heard it and it may fit the situation pretty well, but it's not exactly what you might say for that situation. I used to have a student that would say, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. They had learned it from a commercial. And gotta go might not have meant I gotta go use the restroom, which is where the commercial came from. It was more, I don't really want to do that. It was the student's way of saying, I don't want to do that. I want to be done. Some students have an odd quality of speech. Their tone and intonation is different. Prosody, that rate, that rhythm. We often notice differences in that. The idea that it struggles to express thoughts and ideas. The abstract language and concepts and implied information. So being able to read the room, understanding that the size of the problem and your size of your reaction should match up a little bit. A lot of times our students struggle with that. They might have some things that are unexpected. And when you think about abstract language concepts, our English language is very challenging. So a student might, when we're working on spatial concepts like following directions, put away your materials or wipe off your desk, it might be a struggle because to that student, what they're really doing is wiping on their desk, not wiping off the desk. So some of our concepts in just the English language are challenging. Sequencing and that time concepts, difficult. I've touched on a little bit that pragmatic language difficulties. Those are how we use language. That's the nonverbal language, conversations, as well as communication breakdowns. What do we do when I'm not understood? How do I ask a question for clarity? You notice some of our students will fixate on certain words or phrases or even topics. As they're extremely interested in things, it might be hard to talk about things that they are not interested in. And maybe students want to talk more about things that they are interested in. So that sensory stimuli, we talk about, again, that hypersensitive being overreactive and the hyposensitive being underreactive. Spatial positioning, that's where your body is in the environment. Motor planning, that's how you execute your motor plan. So maybe it's how you walk up and down the steps and mark time. And then overall movement sometimes looks different. Some students are larger with their movements. Some students are smaller with their movements. And we'll talk a lot about tactile, visual, olfactory is your smell and taste, auditory, and the vestibular movement. Some students are able to, again, be overreactive to certain stimuli, and the same student might be underreactive to another stimuli. And in those developmental rates and sequences, a little deeper dive might be regressions in areas. That's often what I hear from families. A student had that skill and they've lost it. Or perhaps a student is significantly delayed, or they stopped developing. A student was making some progress and talking, maybe using some speech, maybe gaining attention, and then it just stopped. You might also know that developmental rates and sequences may be normal or may be depressed. There's not necessarily one direct path. That's why it's a spectrum. When you think about a spectrum, I like to say, think about a color spectrum, because on a color spectrum, it only makes sense that you're not all red or all blue, you're different shades of red. So a student might have stronger depressed rates of development to another student who might have more hypersensitivity to sensory needs. And the order of your skill acquisition, it most often does not follow developmental patterns. I kind of alluded to this when I shared the example of a student who could pick something up very small but struggled with a pencil. Or maybe a student who is able to read, but isn't yet holding a conversation. So we think about, in kindergarten, first grade, students are learning to read and develop those literacy skills. But young children at 2 and 3-year-olds begin to have some back and forth turn taking and begin to get that reciprocity. And they can engage and wait and take a turn and ask a question. So we might often call it an uneven or a scattered profile. Sometimes you might hear the word splinter skills. All right, so the educational impact was the piece that I said was of high importance. So we look at that range of intellectual ability. We look at how severe are the communication difficulties? Where are the breakdowns? Are there inconsistencies and the demonstration of skills and knowledge? We also look at generalization. So can a student use those skills and knowledge in different settings? We look at that concrete versus literal thinking. This often comes in play when we're starting to talk about different perspectives. And so much of literacy gets into what is the author thinking? What are the characters? Why did the character do that? We look at memory. They may have exceptional memory in areas of interest, but might have poor memory in areas of disinterest or lack of connection. If they don't see how they relate to that. You'll also notice that the educational impact might be looking at that student having trouble seeing the big picture. Educational impact can also look like organization problems. Remember that I said initially that the time, understanding time and the concept of time can be a weakness, and that will definitely affect organization. So other common characteristics, you may in your reading hear things like executive functioning. That's organizing, handling multiple tasks, transitioning, adapting to change. You might hear things like repetitive behavior, that perseveration or restrictive interest. It might be physical movement, might be students want to continue doing the same things, might be on specific tasks that they love to do. Might be on specific topics. You might notice that some students have processing speed differences. And many of our students, especially those that begin to discuss more their feelings and be able to engage in mutual regulation activities, we often hear students talk a lot about the anxiety and stress. There's comfort in routine and sameness. And with so much change that just happens in our everyday world, it increases anxiety and stress. So I have a video that I think you should also be able to go back to, but we're going to watch just a few minutes. And these are some young adults, some teenagers talking about living with autism.
My first year teaching, lesson planning was rough. Then I found education.com and realized everything I needed was all. Hi, I'm Dr. Kisslinger. I'm a pediatrician in children's community.
Jen, I can't hear anything.
So Jen, it's probably because you muted yourself.
Okay,
So if you want to start it over and keep yourself unmuted,
okay.
that should be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gislinger. I'm a pediatrician in Children's Community here today with some teens who are going to talk about what it's like to live with autism. I'd like our teens to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Micah. I'm a senior and I enjoy participating in my drama club, choir, and learning to play guitar. So I guess pretty into music, I guess.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel. I'm a junior. I also have a very passionate interest in music, and I'm also into sports and politics.
Hi, I'm Jane. I want to be a nurse and I'm into arts and crafts.
Hi, I'm Zion. I also want to be a nurse. I also have a musical passion, and I love to help others.
Great, thank you guys. Can you guys tell us what it means to be diagnosed with autism?
Yeah, so autism, or as it's technically called, autism spectrum disorder, is whenever someone's brain develops and processes information differently than most people. And so whenever you have autism, that means you can have behavioral or social or learning or communication challenges and struggles and so forth.
And it's important to note that there isn't just one autism, but there's actually many different types. Because autism is what's called a spectrum disorder. And that means that each person with autism will have a different set of strengths and challenges.
And the way that people with autism think and learn and problem solve can all be different. And it can range from highly skilled to severely challenged.
Yeah, some people require a significant amount of help while others may require less, and some people can just go about their daily lives.
So do any of you have autism?
Yeah, I have autism. I have a form of autism called PED, which stands for pervasive developmental disorders. And with that, I face a lot of specific challenges, a lot of which I've gotten through over the years. So one thing is that like I have a problem with eye contact. I don't always latch on to people with my eyes. I have to sometimes remind myself to look at them. I also, as a kid, would often get annoyed or throw fits or have anxiety about little things. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, like the sound of Velcro would literally hurt my ears just because of the way I was wired. Also, I'm just a very socially awkward person. I oftentimes don't realize how other people think. For example, I'm always in other people's personal space, and that's just because it doesn't occur in my mind that hey, they don't like when you're that close to them.
So I also have autism. My parents noticed I had some speech and social problems when I was a really young child. So I had some help programs through early elementary school. And throughout all of elementary school, I would have a very mean and nasty temper. I easily lose my temper over really minor things. And even now, I still have social problems and other sets of complications.
So when you guys found out about your diagnosis, how did you feel? What types of things did you have to deal with?
Well, I remember very well whenever I found out. I believe I was in fourth grade, I believe, when I found out. I was in my parents' room and they told me about that I had autism, and I definitely didn't take that very well. I cried and was sad and stuff. And the thing about it is that there's this idea in our culture of who's normal and who's not normal. And we group people who have autism, other mental disabilities into the not normal category, and they're made fun of and they're outcasts and so forth. And I've had people, some of which have helped me in various programs I've had help with my autism, and said, oh, well, see, there's no such thing as normal. Everyone is different in their own way. And that technically that's true, but in reality, there's this hierarchy in our society, and that was really hard because now I'm not cool anymore. Kids look at me and they think that I'm annoying, they think that I'm dumb, and it was really hard for me to cope with that. And I still to this day sometimes worry that people see me differently. In fact, like whenever various people would work with me, they would often, be nice to me in an ingenuine way. Like if you're nice to like some, like if there's some child, that's getting on your nerves and you're just like, oh yeah, have a nice day to me, and you're just in genuine way. And sometimes I still feel like people treat me like that.
So I found out that I had autism relatively recently. It's only a few years ago. And when I did find out, I was a bit shocked because at the time, I didn't know very much about autism. I had sort of related it to more serious cases that I had seen in school. But I found out that it's not that simple. And it really didn't change that much because I just knew that it doesn't define me. I'm not going to be known as the kid with autism.
Zion and Jane, do you know of anybody personally that has autism?
We do. I've had a friend that I've known since we were about 3 years old. We went to the same preschool together, and we were just friends for a really long time. And then, one day my mom kind of sat me down and said, "Hey, this friend, he has autism." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that's fine." It didn't really affect me at all. And, as we grew up together, I noticed, kids were making fun of him, and that just really kind of made him sad. So, I told my friends, I said, "Hey, this really isn't cool." So we kind of helped him get through school, and we made sure that he had other friends that were going to help him get through this.
Yeah, I also have multiple friends with autism. In fact, over just over summer, I went on vacation with one of them, and I treat them the same as I would treat anybody without autism. And just because that they have a disability does not change how I look at them or how I feel towards them.
Do you guys feel that other kids at school are as accepting as you guys are?
Definitely. There are kids that they treat them like everybody else, but there are definitely some kids that think that kids with autism, they're not capable of being just one of us. And they treat them very meanly and harshly.
Yeah, like I was saying, my one friend that has autism, the kids in school were mean to him, but not in a way that it was noticeable by him. They were so ungenuinely nice to him. Like, they would start conversations with him and kind of subtly be making fun of him in the process, and he didn't realize. And it really hurt me and my friends to see that happening.
Guys, I give you credit. It's very hard to be a spectator and watch that. Micah and Nathaniel, what do you think? Do you feel like you were treated differently?
I feel like in our schools, like whenever you have an extreme case of autism that's obvious to everyone, usually people are generally nice to them. They'll just treat them politely and stuff. But then I think it really gets toxic, you might say, with the people who have a less severe case, but it's still like obvious there's something a little bit not right with them. Like, oftentimes they're made fun of behind their back and they're social outcasts.
And I also had my other cases of autism that many symptoms resolve themselves over time, but even still, I was seen as different. And a lot of people in our school, they would only really want to hang out with people that they thought they would see as cool. Like, that was really all there was to it. So I was always sort of an outsider.
So, I think it's so difficult for all of you guys. You're in this time of your life where all you want to do is find some people that you fit in with. And it's no different with people who have autism. It's just more difficult for them to connect. And they don't feel comfortable around people who don't feel comfortable with them.
Yeah, it's hard enough to fit in when you don't even have a disability. Like, some people don't ever find where they really fit in life. And I just feel like that might be even harder for somebody with a disability because they're just considered like a super outsider, and that's not okay.
Yeah, not at all. And they have feelings, and just like we do, where you had said we all want to feel accepted, and whenever you're not getting that, that can be really hard on top of the bullying and whatnot that they're dealing with.
See, I think one of the important things you can do when you have autism or some kind of disability like that is just to find some really, really good friends. Because the thing about like true friends is that they see all of your problems and all of your quirks and stuff, but yet they still accept you, and they'll try to work through all of it and try to get you past that. And I have some good friends that I feel like really stick to me and stuff. And like, like I said, I'm a socially awkward friend in person, but my friends, we make fun of me, and it's just in like a fun loving way. And I think that's really helped me get over it. And so just getting some friends that accept you can really help, even if, everybody else is making fun of you, even if you have just a few friends that still accept you and love you for who you are, that can really help.
And I also have a few friends, and the friends that I do have are the sort of friends that don't care that I'm different. That makes them real friends, not the sort of fake friendships that I would be forced to have with the sort of supposedly cool kids.
Mike and Nathaniel, what advice would you give to teens dealing with autism?
Like I said before, one of the most important things you can do is find some good friends that really accept you and help you through your struggles. And another thing is that just keep in mind that if you have autism, there are lots of things that you can help to a lot of symptoms and struggles that you will alleviate over the years as you work through, and some that will just go away with maturity. But at the same time, it's also good to remember that you're still going to have autism the day you die, and you're never going to be completely free of your symptoms, which may sound crushing, but it's the reality. I think we need to all, if you have autism, just accept it and own up to it.
You should never think that you cannot succeed just because you have autism. There are plenty of very successful people out there who have autism, like Bill Gates and Albert Einstein.
I think another thing is that if you have autism, or really even if you don't, you just try to find something an activity or group you really like. Try to get involved in a sport, or join your drama club or your marching band or whatever. Really find a group of people that you fit into and become part of a community, a group that you can really identify with, and that can help to work through your various struggles.
Well, it looks like we're out of time for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Kisslinger, for everything you were able to do. I think we had an awesome and very informative discussion on autism and how it can affect so many people in a good way and in a bad way.
Yeah, and remember, if you ever have any questions about this or want to talk to someone about having autism or dealing with someone that has autism, you can talk to your pediatrician or your school guidance counselor about it.
And if you liked today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up.
And remember to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.
Okay, let me go back. Actually, we could just talk for a second. So, I think our team went back and forth on different types of videos to add some engagement for this. And we ultimately chose, that was a hard conversation. I'm so proud of those teenagers. But it was a hard conversation, and I could have put up a feel-good video. But it is April, and at this time, and as we're learning to do better, when we know better, we do better. As we learn more, we try to do better. Just coming to this webinar and talking about awareness, I think if we don't push it to acceptance, then we're kind of missing the boat. And so we show that hard video to show, things that students say. It's not less. We're not less. I think about when the student said you have to find your tribe. And really that is so true for all of our teenagers and all of our society. And so I think about a penguin often. I had one time heard a quote, and it was something about, when you think about a penguin, you don't think less of a penguin because he doesn't fly, right? It's simply, he's a different kind of bird. He's different, he's not less. And so that's why we had the hard video to remind us as we get into strategies for success that, we have to help our students find their tribe. Just like we as adults, we have to find our groups, our people, people that raise us up to be the best we can be. That's what we really want for our students with autism. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, hopefully seamlessly. I was so good at this during COVID, not as good now. Okay, and I lost you guys. So here we go. All right. Oh, strategies for success. One strategy that we talk about over and over with, I talk about with parents, with teachers, with people in the community, is that we can really work to use specific statements, not questions. Questions are hard because it's a challenge to understand the question, as well as answering questions are hard. And so when we use more specific statements, we are able to help our students know what the expectation is. Clearness is kindness. And so when we can give a statement of what we want our student to do, it's very helpful. So at home, one example might be, and I catch myself doing this all the time. I'll say, do you want to brush your teeth? Oh goodness, what did I just say? It's really not a choice. Do you want to brush your teeth? Because as soon as they say no, they do not want to stop what they're doing and brush their teeth. I just caught myself into a bit of a pickle. So if I use statements like in 2 minutes, it's going to be time to brush your teeth. We get the work done much better. Brushing teeth is not a favorite thing in my household, as I would bet it's not for many parents, especially in different stages of development. And that is often a difficult task for our students with autism because of the sensory component of it. So use statements, not questions. You can use statements when it is when it's time to do different tasks. You can use statements to explain things. If you ask a question, help them answer the question, but realize questions are hard. Yes, no is difficult. The second thing we talk about is being consistent with expectations. And so what this might look like is our students, our kids at home. It's hard, I think, at home to be consistent. I always say that I can be more consistent in school than I can be in my home because I have more routines. I have more structure at school. I have more times of the day that we do different things. But at home, things that you can do to try to be more consistent with expectations is keep it the same. So if the consistency is going to be, and this kind of goes with the rules and routines, but if the consistent is going to be, we do this and we do this and we do this, we do these 3 things, and I'm gonna always have you do it by yourself. So it's time to get ready for bed. And my consistency is going to be, you're always gonna put your clothes in the dirty clothes hamper. So my expectation is my child is going to pick up their toys at the end of the night or put their pajamas in the dirty clothes hamper always in the morning. So my expectation is that they can do that, they will do that. And so I can be consistent. One expectation that a lot of families will come to us with questions about is eating at the table. And so if your expectation is going to be, we have a mealtime at the table, then I'm going to be consistent. When we start to wiggle on that expectation, it's a struggle. I don't understand why. So consistent with expectations. We talk a lot with our teachers about rules and routines. And in having rules and routines, like I said, I think it's easier to do this at school. We have so much more structure. But at home, when we have clear rules and clear routines, it's helpful. Rules don't look the same at home versus school. At school, it's important to keep your shoes on, right? For safety. When we leave the house, we need our shoes on. But at home, we might not have to wear our shoes. The rule might be at home, your shoes can be off, but when we get in the car to leave, we have to put our shoes on. At home, it might be the rule is we go to bed at 7:30. And that's always the rule. Even on the weekends, if it's going to be a rule, it has to be the same. Routines are things like your morning routines, your bedtime routines. I will be really honest, I live in a household that hasn't always had a lot of routines, and it doesn't work for me. I need routines, and some of my children at home need routines. And so we've had to work as they've developed. I need routines. My significant other does not need routines. And we've had to compromise because 2 of our 4 children need routines. And so for the good of all, we've got to have some routines. Our bedtime routine, what does it look like? What might work in my family or Miss Tina's family may not be the same in your family, and it doesn't need to be, nor am I here to tell you that it should be. What I'm here to encourage is that if you have routines, your student with autism will be more successful. They will gain more independence, and they will know what the expectation is. Our kids want to, they want to do right. And in their minds, sometimes it's very clear. Remember when we talked about their feelings and how they have trouble with shades of feelings? Well, they have trouble with shades of routines. And the clear rules, when I think of rules, it might not be the same as what you think of rules. It doesn't matter exactly that they're the same rules that I have in my house as you would have in your house. What's important is that you have some rules and high expectations. If it's important for you that a rule is the food stays in the kitchen, then we have to work on the food stays in the kitchen. If that's not a big deal, if food can be in the living room and in the bedrooms, don't make that a rule. Another thing we talk about is this idea of a pre-MAC principle. And there's, you might hear this if you ever Google it, you're going to hear that it's this idea that we're going to pair liked things and disliked things. Easy things with difficult activities. First, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. I like to compare this with an Oreo cookie. Because if the Oreo cookie is the part I like the most, I'm going to make sure that something good is next to something that I don't like. If I just get to eat the inside of the Oreo, I'm just going to grow to like huge and I won't be able to work, right? But I have to do things I don't like. But that doesn't mean I only do things I don't like. If everything is hard work, it makes it pretty taxing. So if we compare and we pair together, oh, I really, really don't want to brush my teeth. But after I brush my teeth, we do this. So first I brush my teeth, then we get to do my favorite book. First, we are going to sit at the table to have dinner. Then we're going to get to watch our favorite TV show for 30 minutes. So that idea that we're helping understand, first we do this, then we do this, pairing liked and disliked. I usually caution, I use this pre-MAC principle when I'm helping families a lot of time with some grocery shopping or tasks that no one in my family likes to do it. Maybe I do. Maybe I like to run to Target, but no one else in my family likes to run to Target. But there's times I need to. So first we're going to go to Target, then we're going to go do this. And I make that then something they like a little bit more than Target. You could even use this principle while you're at the store. So first we have to get these 3 items, then you get to pick. I know I'm going to have to get lunch food anyway. So you get to pick whether you want these crackers or these crackers. That leads me into our choices. So when you think about choices can be such a large range. When you give choices, you give your child some options. You give them a voice. And this is true for our earliest of your learners, our youngest of students. Those children who are non-speaking, who are learning to communicate, who are learning to engage. They can make choices of objects. They can make choices of the toys they want to play with, the toothbrush they want you to use, the toothpaste. I can make a choice out of just about anything. And it's when you give your child a choice, they have some voice, they have some control, they're more likely to willingly participate. I think over time, too, those choices, as students get more and more skills, they become ways to negotiate. So we think about our teenagers that want to push how late they stay out or how long they're on the YouTube or what they're doing on TikTok. If we have some choices for them, you can do it, do you want to do 5 more minutes? Do you want to do 10 more minutes? Choices help with giving our students options, voice, and it gives us a way to negotiate. As students learn to navigate our social world, we talk about being very intentional with our social skills teachings. And there's so many opportunities at home to teach social skills. This may be things like you get to choose whether you're going to sit, students big enough to sit in the front seat of the car. You want to sit in the front seat of the car going to school or coming home from school today. It's the opposite, your brother gets to do it. You could use choices with foods. Do you want this on your plate? Do you want this on your plate? Do you want this on your plate or in a bowl? Maybe the choice isn't what they have for dinner. Maybe the choice is where the dinner gets placed. Would you like dinner in a plate today or on a bowl? Would you like it on the red plate or the blue plate? Would you like to use the long fork or the short fork? And then how do we incorporate choices? Remember, most importantly, the choices have to be things that you're okay with. So in thinking about choices, please only pick choices that are okay choices for you. I don't give choices that I'm not okay with. Sometimes kids, as they get more and more language and are learning more about our social world, I had a student the other day tell me this. They said that they didn't like either one of my choices. I was like, oh, they're getting it, right? And that's kind of life. I don't always like all of my choices either. So sometimes we can negotiate that. Sometimes I'll ask my students, so what would be a better choice? What choice would you like me to offer? Let's talk about this. Let's negotiate this. And one of the other strategies that we talk about for success is using visuals. This is a broad statement, right? So when you think about visuals, a lot of our students within the autism spectrum, they think very visually. In their mind, they're making a picture of what we're saying. We want to make sure that our students have the same picture that we want them to have, right? So when students have trouble with perception and understanding others' perspective, we have to be careful that we are understanding their perspective and that we're helping them learn to understand other perspectives. And one way we can do that is with visuals. Visuals also help us stay consistent with rules and routines. It helps us be more independent for students to be able to do things on their own. I am one, even to this day, I will leave some visuals for family members to do some tasks. I think about what happens when I don't have my planner, or if something were to happen to my phone, because it has everything on it, right? It has my email, it has my calendar, it has my reminders. All of those things are visual supports to help me be able to manage my adult world. Well, we are here to encourage our students with autism need help with that. And so how can we help them with that? We can help them by giving them some visuals. Help them with time by setting a timer. You're going to have 2 more minutes on the computer. When the timer goes off, it will be time to do this. That's keeping with a routine, and that's giving them a visual reminder of how long that time might be. I can go back to almost each one of these successes, these strategies, and make it visual. So if I'm going to be consistent about expectations, I have something coming up with family. We're going to be in a situation where you're going to need to sit, and you're going to have to sit for a few minutes. So to be consistent with expectations, I might make a picture for my kiddo to know that we're going to go here and we're going to have to sit and wait for a little bit. When I think about my rules and routines, I might have a rule in the house that when I'm on the phone, I have a little quiet hand, and I have a little picture of it to remind my kiddos, oh, when mom's on the phone, please don't interrupt. A routine, my bedtime routine, whether my student is reading or not yet reading, I could have some very basic pictures or words to help them remember all the steps in the routine. If I think about first bed, I might show a picture. I gave the Target example. When we go to Walmart or Target, first we're going to get laundry soap. And let's think my list. My list is laundry soap and crackers. First, we're going to get laundry soap, then we're going to get crackers. And I could show a picture of laundry soap that I took. We got to get this, and we got to get crackers. Or maybe I just show my child my list. When we're at the store, we've got to get these 5 things. Then we're going to go do this. Maybe I make that the last thing on my list. Maybe I give the choice, hey, can you help me make my list? What type of crackers do we want? Let's put them on the list. What type of bread do we want to make sandwiches this week? Let's put it on our list. I'm going to pause right there and see how we're doing with some of the content. Are we doing okay that I can go to show some more visuals?
Jen, I just also wanted to point out that there are some questions in the chat that I'm getting to, and that at the end we can address as well.
Great.
So, right. Okay.
And am I leaving enough time at the end for all the questions? About 20 minutes?
Okay.
20 minutes, will that be okay?
That's great for me.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, that'll be a perfect amount of time. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is new for us. Thanks for being flexible.
You're
So-
doing a great job.
Thank
Sure
you.
is.
Here are some examples of what visuals might look like. Now that I've given you some images in your head and let you see how hard it was for me to talk without showing you some visuals, let's see if we were kind of on the same page. So what I've been talking about are things like, first we go to Target, then we're going to the playground. That's always a fun one. You can tell I like to go to Target. I don't get to do it as often as I like. Maybe it's a checklist. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And a choice might be, I let my kiddo pick which ones he's going to do, which ones are a definite no, and which ones are a maybe. So I make a checklist, I put boxes next to it. My kiddo decides he's going to do the green ones. The X means no, I don't want to do that one because I'm giving him some choice. And the question mark means, I don't know what you want, Mom. Or maybe we do it together. Maybe it's just the things to do. Maybe it's time to brush your teeth. I know my kiddos have never liked brushing teeth, so I've used a lot of pictures of toothbrushes in my house. Maybe my to-do list is bath, book, then bed. So my routine is we are going to do bath, book, then bed. Every night, we're going to do bath, book, then bed. The bonus of making it visual is then when I need to have an oops and change something up, because tonight we're going to do bath, book, and then maybe I forgot and we have a special guest. And so we're going to do bath, book, and maybe put away the laundry before we go to bed. And I'm going to have my kiddo help me. Maybe we don't have their favorite book. Something's happened to it and I know we've lost it because that happens. And today on our to-do list, I have my same to-do list of bath, book, and bed, but I'm going to let them know ahead of time before we do bath that guess what? Today, the book is gone. I don't have it. I've lost it. I know it's your favorite. Instead of doing book, I'm going to cross out book, and I'm going to put that we are going to do a tickle game or a quick a cuddle game. And the last one I show you is just a little bit of a 5-point. So this was a strategy I've used quite a bit with families. When we go, it was a kiddo who sometimes needed some help. They went some places where they had to use a quieter volume. So sometimes your schools have these. If they do, I would use the one they have. But this is one that I made that 1 is no talking, a 2, you're going to use a soft voice. This kiddo liked to go to libraries often and had trouble being in the library. A 3 is that classroom voice, and we called it a classroom voice because the kiddo knew that. It might be a home voice. 1 was a recess or an outside voice. And then a 5 was like screaming. So you can sometimes use a scale like this. You can make a 5-point scale for anything from loudness to being too silly to maybe just, you know, being so mad that you've kind of flipped a gasket. Maybe you're so upset. The idea is that a 5, our goal is to avoid it. Okay. So if we keep thinking about those strategies for success, that leads me right into, let's take some of those questions, those specific things. I'll stop sharing, that way we can, maybe they can see us better.
So for questions,
Mm-hmm.
we had a question about, one of the first questions was, did an adult person with autism assist with the preparation of this presentation? And I had shared that someone who identifies on our team as autistic did review these materials. Is there anything else we wanted to share about that, Ms. Jen?
Yeah, and I think we're working on that more and more. That's something we talk about often in our team. And so yes, and that's something that was one of the reasons why we showed the video we showed, so that it was the perspective of someone who is autistic as well.
And then there was a question about boundaries, and so experienced a lot of bullying and understanding or perceiving and understanding what no means. And this young person really, you know, I don't know the age, but I'm assuming is, and I don't know if they're a social partner or really any more information. I asked, but I didn't get clarification yet. So, but
Tina, it was elementary.
oh, it was.
So
Okay.
like,
Thank you.
So, you know, bullying is a hard topic, and the strategies we use really differ. Elementary, how we work on conflict resolution and educating looks a little different than middle school and high school.
I'm sorry, Jen, but I did mention that CERTS was a really good framework to really systematically look at what kind of communication levels they have, and then creating plans around that. I'm sorry, I didn't see the responses so I don't know why that's happening, but anyhow.
A lot of times, ladies, the responses will come back in the form of an open question. So if you go back to the open questions, you can see.
Okay.
So if you think about, I think we combat bullying on 2 different levels, right? So we help our students who met criteria for autism, who have autism. We help them understand why students do that, what they might, how they, we talk about struggles that other students have with understanding perspective. And we talk about that. We talk about that this is a big problem. I think every place we go in the EPS world, I see buildings, teams, communities in different places with this. And as our mission and SSD is to be more equitable and have more inclusion, we're talking about it more and more. I think younger, we're helping students understand some of their biases. We talk about different, not less. Yes, Ms. Tina?
I was going to say that I've seen schools or classrooms address bullying behavior by having someone share what autism is and what that means for someone that age, and having like a little session like what we're doing here, sharing that same sort of information, like what it means and how we're all alike and how we're alike and how we're different, and sharing that information. I think I've seen that be really helpful to get gen ed students or any students really understand that their behavior is really negatively affecting someone else. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Ms.
No, that
Jen.
was beautiful. And that's so true. We try to do more awareness and acceptance activities and highlight many different types, disability awareness days, as well as different people awareness. And that's why I say across the county, districts are at different places with their current systems, but we have lessons that teachers are doing. We have some resources to help teachers. We have district like principals and district leadership are taking some classes to help understand. It is real. I don't want to downplay it. And we need to keep getting better and better. But I would say in every situation where I'm at where bullying is brought up, it's very specific to that team, how we're going to address it. And it looks at both the student's level of understanding and also where that building's at. And depending on how those link up, like different strategies are used. That's not real clear, but it's so individualized. Just today I was working with a middle schooler, and we were talking, the teacher had brought in a book that was all about it. It was a nonfiction story, but it was all about bullying, and we were problem solving and talking about it, and then they were relating it to their own life, and we actually had made like a bullseye of these are your friends and these are acquaintances, and these aren't even nice people. So how can we help people just become better, kinder, nicer people?
I was going to also say, when I had responded about CERTs and CERTs as a framework, another question came up about what is CERTs. Jen, since you've worked so extensively with CERTs, can you answer that question?
So CERT stands for social communication, emotional regulation, and transactional supports. It's a framework for helping students with autism. It was developed by a group of people, Barry Prezant, Amy Lawrent, Emily Rubin. There's one more, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head. It was developed by SLP, OT in collaboration, special education. And the idea with it is that we can help our students through this framework. We use it to monitor progress, but to break down those social communication skills, which include things like that joint attention that we talked about a little bit today, what those skills really are, following a point, following eye contact, eye gaze, as well as that symbol use, which are things like language as symbols. And can a student understand multiple meanings of a word? Do they need pictures? Do they need objects? Then the emotional regulation piece is that self-regulation as well as mutual regulation. What skills do the kids have? What skills might we need? And a developmental sequence of how we're going to work on those. And then transactional supports are those, to put it simply, it's the things we do that help and that hurt the situation. So it might be things like giving choices. It might be things like not using as many questions, using more statements. It might be things like simplifying your language, making things visual. If a student uses augmentative communication, that would be a transactional support. So it's a framework that we use. We teach teachers and teams how to use it, SLP, usually SLPs and teachers, though we have some OTs and social workers who have also been trained in the framework. I can't say I've ever had a family take the training, although I can't say that I have, but I don't know that they couldn't. It's pretty in-depth and deep. I have used it a lot with families. What we love about the CERTS framework is that it is truly about family engagement and looking at how the student does in multiple environments and with multiple different types of tools and strategies. And it's very much family centered. And so Barry Prezant, he is one of the most vocal developers of the framework, and he talks a lot about family engagement. He actually has a podcast called Uniquely Human, and he does it with a young man who is autistic. And I think Amy Lawrence she has a website called Autism Level Up, which is also, she does it in collaboration with an autistic coworker. And so they're both pretty active in the neurodiverse community and neurodiverse affirming. But if anyone would like more information, you can reach out directly. We can dive deeper into that.
And then we have, along with those same guidelines or same questions, going down that road about self-advocacy goals and covering all of our bases. This is a family whose child has just received the diagnosis 6 months ago, and they're concerned about the bullying and the understanding what no is. So I would just say keep working with your IEP team. This is, no one knows your students the way you do. So if you keep sharing and keep having those conversations with your IEP team about your concerns and both with the progress and the challenges that you're having, because more information is just more powerful, and we can sort of fine tune materials or resources or strategies to help your student understand what no is and how to stand up for herself when she's being bullied. And then we have another.
And Tiffany, I think what goes with that is that partnership, because what it might look like in one setting, it might look slightly different in another setting.
Right.
I had a young student today tell me, we were talking about bullying, and I said, we had quite the conversation. Have you ever just said, I don't like that? And she's like, no. And I'm like, I don't know that I could be that brave either. So how do you want to do it? And the strategy we used was, she's okay ignoring it. It bothers her, but she's okay ignoring it. So what we did was, she has some affirmation cards in her pocket that when she's feeling that way right now, she doesn't want to deal with it. It is middle school girls. She's autistic. She identifies as being autistic, but she does not want to, that's not a challenge she wants to take on right now. She's like, I just want to ignore it. I just want you to know. And I'm like, well, do you want me to handle it? Well, not really. And I'm like, well, then what are we going to do about it? We said, we still need to do something. And she said, well, I don't know. And we came up with, it does kind of bother her, or she wouldn't have brought it to us. And so she's got five little tickets in her pocket in her backpack that she's going to look at when somebody says something she doesn't like. She's going to pull out her visual for, I'm going to tell them no, I'm going to ignore it, or I'm going to feel good. Like, and then these are things that I can say to myself so that I have positive self-talk to feel good about it. But I think when she expressed her perspective was, I have control now. So it's all very individualized.
It is. Then we have a question about off topic or a different topic. A pre-service teacher getting ready to teach special ed How do you best build relationships with parents of those with autism or any other disability? Any tips or things to keep in mind?
What do you think?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about collaboration. I always see the families, whether it's parents or grandparents or, whoever is help raising the child, as the experts. So they know where they see their child, they know what their post-secondary goals are going to be. So just working with them, always talking. I know when I was in the classroom, I communicated with my families every day through Classroom Dojo. I don't know if you've heard about that. I thought it was a great tool to give live feedback, photographs, surveys. So I would say constant communication.
Yeah, that partnership.
Right.
I was thinking something that we talk a lot about is listening to understand,
Empathy.
because you don't always have the answers.
Right.
And that's probably the trickiest thing for me, that I think I've matured and as I've grown in this field, that especially with autism, because it's a spectrum, and you don't, not every child is the same. Everybody is so unique, that it's really about listening to understand and then working together and having that that back and forth communication.
Yeah, and Jen, I'd like to kind of go on that as well. Something that we talk to families about and also staff about is assuming positive intent.
Right.
It's such a great way to build that relationship, is if you just assume that each side, parents, staff, teachers, are wanting what's best and just learning how to communicate that so that you come up with the best plan for your student.
That's a great point, Miss Emily. Oh, I'm excited for you to be entering the teaching world, though. There really wasn't any other questions. Is there anything? Thank you. Okay. There's nothing else on there.
Thank you so much for your expertise. We are so lucky at Special School District to have dedicated people like you guys to teach our families and our staff so that we can make sure that we are doing our best by kids. And I know that's what both of you want. And I have always said that I'm so lucky to be part of Special School District for reasons like this.
That's right.
I'm not sure
a great place to work.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone knows this, but not every district has these opportunities. So I'm very grateful for you both. Jen, would you mind throwing up the last couple of slides for me?
Some helpful websites. And then our contact information.
And you guys can call us. We do have a couple more events coming up this year. I know we're kind of all sliding into summer break coming up. I'm looking forward to that as well, but we do have another webinar like this coming up on April 10th on toilet training. It will be from 6:30 to 7:30. You can go to our website to register for that. We have 2 more lunch and learns coming up. Those are in the middle of the day. They are live streamed on YouTube. On April 26th, we have the National Alliance for Mental Illness. You may know it as NAMI, coming to talk about their organization. And then to wrap out the year on May 24th, the Family and Community Engagement Department will be here talking about summer engagement and activities. We have one more family cafe coming up, which is opportunities for families to learn from one another and collaborate in a safe space. They are located at North Technical High School. So that's happening in a couple of weeks. And we have a couple more hub huddles. So our hub is located again at North Tech High School in Florissant, and we have CASTLE, which is the Community Action Agency of St. Louis County, there 2 more times, once in April and once in May. and they can help connect families with utility assistance, weatherization assistance, things like that. And then the Higher Education Consortium will be there this month as well. And the Higher Education Consortium can help you discover access to post-secondary outcomes, job training, things like that. So we would love to see you at any one of those events. And if you have any questions about those events, please contact us and let us know.
Thank you so much.
We got one more slide, I think, just our contact information. So I went through a lot of information about what we have coming up. If you have questions about that, please email us. Our email is super simple. It's just face@ssdmo.org, or you can give us a call at 314-989-8460. After this webinar has ended, you will receive a 6-question survey. We'd really appreciate you filling that out and giving us your honest feedback so that we know how to go forward with our programming for next year. And we can let these ladies know what an amazing job they did. So thank you everyone for being here this evening, and we look forward to speaking with you at our future events. Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Take care.